tell us a little bit about you all. What are y'all's love stories? So tell us a snapshot of you all's love story, how you met, years together, etc.
Okay, so we met a few years ago. It's interesting because Terrence is also a poet, and he's a part of a poetry troupe called Word Society. Shout out to Word Society, our family. And I've seen him perform before. What's so funny about this is when I saw him perform, I was actually on a date with a friend at a poetry event for on Valentine's Day. And yeah, Terrence was there. I saw him perform, and I was like, "Wow, like who is that?" And then
Okay, who is that? All right.
didn't really think too much of it after the fact. And then fast forward, I ended up meeting his cousin. Him and his cousin had an organization called Soul Society, which stands for Support, Opportunity, Unity, and Leadership. That they've been running this year marks 5 years for Soul Society. And so I met his cousin, and his cousin would send me text messages about, come support us. We're having a meeting, different things like that. So there was a particular meeting that I got an invite to that was at North Carolina A&T State University, where I finished my master's. And the meeting was about it was a meeting of the minds for people in the community to come together to try to figure out, how to bring your talents and your gifts to help make the community better, right? It was like a call to action. And so I was like, you know what? He's been sending me these messages. I haven't gone to not one meeting yet. This is a time for me to do something. And I had been thinking about ways to be more community involved. So I was like, you know what? I've been thinking about doing some community service. Let me go to this meeting. So I went to the meeting, and his cousin was there, and Terrence was in the background. His cousin did a lot of the speaking. And I noticed that, they were organized. It was a lot of people at this meeting. But there were some things that I was like, oh, I can really help them, get maybe better organized. I can create a digital form so people can use paper. Like, I want to help. So I mentioned, rose my hand and said, like, I would love to help y'all do this. And it was like, great, we'll talk after the meeting. And so Terrence had said something during the meeting, and he said it in like a kind of forceful, kind of like, he wasn't disrespectful, but he was just like, yeah. And I was like, oh, shoot. Okay.
All right.
So after the meeting, I went down to where he was, and they were selling shea butter. And I was like, ooh, I had just ran out of shea butter. I needed it. So I went down there and purchased the shea butter, and I saw Terrence. And it was like a movie. He was like, the first thing
I love this story.
The first thing he asked me was, hey, what's your name? I told him what my name was. He was like, what has your lock journey taught you?
Okay. What
has my lock journey taught me? Who is this man? At that point, I was like, okay, God, what is going on? So it was such a great question, because it was something that I hadn't really thought about at that moment. And I had just reached my 1-year lockiversary. So it was a time, where I was like, okay, I really get to answer this question. But at the same time, this is the first time that I've really been able to reflect and think about, wow, what have I learned on this journey? So as I'm giving him the answer, it was very organic, because it was the first time I ever gave it before or said it out loud or thought about it. And after I finished, I was just looking at him like, wow, that felt good to say that out loud. And so, we talked, and I gave him my business card. And so we ended up, he moved to the side, and I went and I talked to his friend, his cousin, Brad. And I was just like, yeah, so I want to help y'all with the organization. I want to create a Google form for you all as a sign-in sheet. That way it could be digital when you have your meetings. You can keep the information, keep the data, that sort of thing. And it was like, great. And I said, why don't y'all come over to the house one day this week? I'll cook. I'll show y'all how to create the Google form. And, you know, we can talk and all that stuff. So I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 days later, they came over. I cooked my famous vegan spaghetti and we did the Google form, but we talked for hours. We talked for hours. And we talked about our dreams and our goals. And I mean, it was just like, it was magical. And there was a moment that we had where his cousin wasn't in the room and it was just us two. And we could just both feel like the energy, like what is going on. So to wrap this up, his cousin and him and his cousin, they left. They walked out the house and they were going to the parking lot to the car. And I was like, dang, I didn't get his number. So I was like, all right, think quick, what I'm about to do. So he had been reading this book. What was the name of the book?
Spiritual Solutions.
Spiritual Solutions by Deepak Chopra. And I have a lot of books and I also have a lot of vinyl records in my house. So I was looking through the vinyl, he was reading the book. But I noticed that book in particular, he had in his hand a lot. So I was like, all right. So I called his cousin. I was like, are y'all still out in the parking lot? And he was like, yeah. And I said, can you tell your cousin to come here real quick? So he was like, yeah. So I like timed it perfectly to where as he walked up to the door, I opened the door and I had the book in my hand and I was just like, hey, you know, I noticed that you were reading this book. You know, I want you to have it. And, you know, after you finish reading, you know, maybe we could talk about it. And he was just like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So what happened after that? You didn't call me.
I didn't tell her that night. I texted her in the morning.